Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. Hailey Monroe stepped out of the SUV just after sunrise, the air in Mount Pleasant still cool and clean. The house looked like every other place her family had rented near a base: white siding, 2 stories, a trimmed lawn, and a porch swing that creaked when the wind kicked up. Boxes were stacked by the door with black marker labels: kitchen, books, uniforms. She grabbed her backpack, checked the zipper twice, then glanced back at her mom. Jessica stood in the doorway with a travel mug and that steady posture Hailey knew better than her own reflection. They didn't need many words in the morning. A nod from Jessica was enough. Hailey answered with one of her own and headed for the curb where the bus would stop. Lincoln Ridge High sat on the north edge of Charleston, red brick and long windows and a flag out front that popped in the coastal breeze. The halls were already humming by the time Hailey got there. She moved through the flow of kids like she'd done a dozen times in other schools, shoulders close, eyes up just enough to see signs, schedule folded in her palm. Locker 1327 stuck for a second, then opened with a small jerk. Inside, metal shelves, clean and empty, ready to collect another year of someone else's life. She kept her head down until a voice slid into the quiet beside her. "You're new, right?" The girl had glossy black hair and the kind of easy smile people notice. "I'm Taylor." Hailey nodded and gave her name. Taylor looked over the schedule. "We've got English together. The teacher's fine. Don't be late to history, though. Peterson marks tardy if you breathe wrong." Taylor said it like a joke, but Hailey tucked it away like a rule. They walked a few steps together until the bell hit. Taylor peeled off with a quick wave. "See you later, Monroe." English was first. The teacher asked everyone to share one thing about themselves. Hailey used the same line she always used. "Just moved here. I like reading." No one pressed for more. She sat near the window and answered when she was called on. Her voice was steady, careful, quiet. It wasn't shyness. It was practice. Between classes, the hall smelled like floor cleaner and warm plastic from the vending machine. Posters for football tryouts and debate team layered the walls. A couple of boys joked too loudly about something that didn't matter. On her way to math, Hailey caught a glimpse of herself in the glass of the trophy case: blue backpack, brown hair, eyes that watched without inviting anyone in. She didn't mind. Invisible was easy. Invisible was safe. Lunch rolled around faster than she expected. The cafeteria was a rectangle of noise and lines that never moved. Hailey grabbed a sandwich and scanned for a spot. Taylor waved her over to a table by the windows. "So, where'd you move from?" Taylor asked. "Norfolk," Hailey said. It was true and simple. "Military?" Taylor added, like she was asking about the weather. Hailey nodded. "Mom's Navy." Taylor made a face that wasn't good or bad, more like curious. "That tracks. We get a lot of that here." The conversation slid to homework and a teacher who assigned too much. For 15 minutes Hailey ate, listened, and let herself relax a little. History after lunch was in a cold room that smelled faintly like dry erase markers. Mr. Peterson was tall, mid-40s, tie too tight, voice that liked to fill space. He wrote "Foundations of Service" across the board and spun to face the class. "We're starting with American institutions," he said. "If you've got a family connection to the military, it might help your context." He let the sentence float like bait. A few heads turned. Hailey felt the look but kept her eyes on her notebook. Peterson scanned the room, landed briefly on her, then moved on. He gave a quick speech about discipline, sacrifice, and statistics. None of it was wrong. None of it risked anything. When the bell rang, Hailey packed fast. Outside, the hallway felt warmer, like the building had exhaled. She checked her next room number and headed toward science. On the way, a kid bumped her shoulder hard enough to shift her backpack. "Sorry," he said, but he didn't slow down. She straightened the strap and kept going. Little things like that happened in every school the first week. It didn't mean anything yet. The day rounded off with a guidance office stop where a secretary asked Hailey to sign another form and handed her a map she didn't need. "Welcome to Lincoln Ridge," the woman said. It was kind, practiced, and fine. The bus ride home cut through live oaks and quiet streets. Hailey rested her head against the window and watched the water flash between houses. When she stepped off at her block, the sun had shifted and the porch swing moved in a lazy arc inside. The house still smelled like cardboard and lemon cleaner. Jessica was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, knife tapping through bell peppers with quick, even strokes. "How'd it go?" she asked. Hailey dropped her backpack by the table. "It was okay." The answer covered everything and nothing. Jessica didn't push. She wiped the cutting board and nodded toward the fridge. "There's tea." They ate early. The TV stayed off. Hailey talked in pieces about the building, the schedule, a teacher who wrote too small, a girl named Taylor who was friendly. Jessica listened like she did everything, fully, quietly, ready to catch things that slipped between words. After dinner, Hailey took a box labeled "Books" to her room and stacked paperbacks on the shelf in a line that felt like a life raft. She opened her window a crack and let the coastal air move the curtains. Around 9, Jessica knocked. "Lights out soon," she said. She hesitated at the door, then added, "You did fine today." Hailey managed a small smile. "Thanks." When the door closed, she lay back and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be the same and also not. That was how it was with new places. The first day settled in like a foundation. The second day decided whether it held. She set her alarm, slid the phone face down, and pulled the blanket to her chin. Outside, a car passed, then quiet returned. In the dark, Hailey pictured the hallways again, the locker, the cafeteria windows, the chalk dust in Peterson's room. She organized them in her head the way she always did, like mapping a route. Then she let the images fade, keeping only what mattered: stay steady, say little, watch everything. It had worked before. It would work here. Down the hall, Jessica stood alone by the sink, hands braced on the counter, watching the porch light throw a pale circle on the front steps. The uniform bag hung behind the bedroom door where it always hung. She didn't look at it. She rinsed the mug, turned off the light, and breathed out. Another town. Another start. She hoped, like she always hoped, that quiet would last. By second period the next day, the halls felt sharper at the edges, like the building itself had listened and decided to test her. Hailey followed the same route, hit the same locker, kept the same pace. Taylor found her at the turn near the science wing and fell into step like they'd done it for months. "You good?" Taylor asked. "Yeah," Hailey said. It was her default answer. It usually kept things simple. Lunch was the first slip. They sat by the windows again, light bouncing off metal tables, the noise a steady wall. A guy from the soccer team wandered by and asked where Hailey moved from. "Norfolk," she said. "Military," Taylor added, half proud for knowing, half fishing for reaction. The guy grinned. "Your dad Navy?" Hailey didn't think, she just corrected like she always did. "My mom." He blinked, then shrugged. "Cool." He moved on. It should have ended there. It didn't. A girl 2 seats down leaned over. "What does she do?" The question hung. Hailey's mother had drilled it into her: keep answers small, keep details none. She's in special operations, Hailey said, barely above the cafeteria noise. It was too much even at that volume. Taylor's eyebrows popped. Like, what, exactly? Hailey took a sip of water and let the sentence die. Taylor let it go, but the table didn't. A boy laughed. Special ops like movies? Another whispered, sure, okay. The edge of a smirk pulled at a mouth 2 chairs away. It was small. It was enough. History after lunch was colder than yesterday. Mr. Peterson had a slideshow ready on elite military units. He liked the stage. He paced in front of the screen and pointed with the marker like he was directing traffic. Selection rates. Attrition. Standards. The facts were fine. Then he tapped a line on the slide and said, statistically speaking, these are male domains. He didn't have to look at Hailey for the sentence to find her. A kid in the back coughed a laugh. Peterson half smiled and kept going. Hailey stared at the margin of her notebook and traced a square until the pen wanted to punch through the paper. The bell rang, and a voice trailed behind her in the hall, too loud to be private, too low to be called out. Special ops, huh? Another, G.I. Jane. Someone made a fake drum roll with their palm on a locker door. Hailey kept her eyes forward and didn't change her pace. She told herself it would burn out by Friday. It was only Wednesday. By last period, a meme had already found her phone. Someone had pulled a stock photo of a woman in a wetsuit and slapped sunglasses on it with a caption, "When Mom is Navy but also Wonder Woman." Hailey turned the screen off and slid the phone back into her backpack. She'd seen worse in other schools for different reasons. It still hit the same place, under the ribs, where breath wants to hide. The bus ride home felt longer. She watched water and marsh grass pass and tried to list the assignments due. At the house, Jessica was at the table with a laptop open and a notepad full of lines that didn't look like grocery lists. She glanced up. Smooth? Hailey shrugged. Normal. Jessica studied her face for half a second longer than usual, then nodded. Dinner in 20. That night Hailey lay awake later than she wanted. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was alert, which was worse. She could feel how fast whispers moved when adults pretended not to hear. In the morning she wore the same jacket, tied her hair the same way, and left 5 minutes earlier. The cafeteria was louder on day 3. Taylor waved her over again. People are curious, Taylor said, trying to sound neutral. They can be curious, Hailey said. She kept her tone even. A boy from the meme slid into the conversation without asking. So, your mom trains like the guys? He said it with a grin that wanted a scene. My mom trains like her job requires, Hailey answered. He clicked his tongue like he'd caught a fish. What's the job, then? She let her eyes drift back to her tray. The boy snorted and pushed away. Right. Classified. The word carried, the way certain words do when a room wants to hear them. History became the stage it always becomes when a teacher enjoys a crowd. Peterson set a photo of a beach on the screen and talked about selection. Hell week, he said, rolling the phrase around like a coin. He opened the floor. Thoughts? A hand shot up. Could a woman even make it? Peterson didn't answer right away. He gave the room a look that said, be reasonable. Standards are standards, he said finally. There are physiological realities. He said it like a fact, not an opinion. A couple of boys nodded like they'd been waiting for that line. The girl next to Hailey shifted in her seat and stared at the wall clock instead of the slide. After class, Peterson stopped Hailey by the door under the pretense of handing back a worksheet. Your context might be different, he said softly. But be careful with claims. This age, rumor mills. He forced a chuckle. You understand. Hailey met his eyes for 1 second. Yes, sir. It wasn't agreement. It was the shortest exit path. The call to the office came the next morning. The voice over the intercom pronounced her last name wrong. She sat in a plastic chair while the secretary pretended to be busy. Principal Hayes brought her in with a look that tried to be concerned and landed closer to tired. "We've had a few distractions," he said. "Stories spreading." He didn't accuse. He advised. Sometimes, to settle in, less is more. Hailey stared at the framed diploma behind his head and kept her mouth closed. He slid a paper across the desk she didn't have to sign. "We want you to succeed here." The meeting ended with a handshake that wasn't warm. By lunch, "less is more" sounded like a dare in her head. She tried to avoid the table talk by eating outside on the concrete steps, but Taylor found her anyway and sank down beside her. "They're being dumb," Taylor said. "It'll blow over." Hailey nodded, grateful for the company even if the forecast was wrong. A group walked past and one of the boys did a bad roll on the grass and called it training. The laughter wasn't big. It was cutting. The first real hit came the next day when she opened her biology notebook and a handful of sticky notes fell out. "Liar." "Movie girl." "G.I. Jane." One read, "Ask Mom for autograph." The class watched without watching. Hailey picked them up one by one, folded them, and slid them into the pocket of her binder. Her hands didn't shake. Her jaw did. At home, the fork in the road waited at the kitchen table. Jessica noticed the set of Hailey's mouth and didn't ask right away. She plated dinner, sat, and let the quiet do the work for 2 minutes. Then, "Want to tell me?" Hailey shrugged and tried the same shield as before. "Normal." Jessica gave a tiny nod. "Okay." She didn't push, but she also didn't change the subject. She ate, eyes down, mind obviously somewhere that wasn't the kitchen. When the dishes were done, she wiped the counter like she was cleaning a map. Friday brought the assembly announcement. History department program, auditorium, mandatory. Hailey felt her stomach tighten the way it does when the floor looks fine but you've walked enough to know it isn't. She filed in with everyone else and took a seat near the back, close to the exit, a habit learned in too many buildings with too many exits. On stage, Peterson loved the mic. He talked about service, sacrifice, legacy. He pointed at photos of men in cold surf, men hauling boats, men covered in sand. He described attrition like a badge of honor. The room buzzed with whispers and the occasional clap. When he said, "some of the toughest men alive," the word men hung heavy. Hailey felt it land in her chest like a knock. She kept her eyes on the aisle lights and counted them down the row. Someone in the front shouted something about, "Tell that to Monroe," and laughter broke open like a bag of marbles on a gym floor. Heads turned. She heard her name bounce twice, then 3 times. Her pulse ticked faster, but her face didn't change. She breathed in, breathed out, and tried to shrink into the seat without moving at all. The weekend couldn't come fast enough. When the bell finally let her go, she walked past the trophy case and caught her reflection again. Same jacket. Same eyes. The school around her had changed, though. It knew her now, not as a person, but as a rumor with a schedule. Outside, the air smelled like rain. She rode home with her hands hooked under the backpack straps and her jaw unclenched for the first time since lunch. At the house, the porch swing moved in that lazy arc again. Inside, boxes were fewer, rooms more like home. Jessica looked up from her notepad, reading more in Hailey's silence than any report could say. "We'll handle it," Jessica said, "no more detail than that." Hailey nodded, not sure what it meant yet, only sure that the quiet she'd hoped for wasn't coming back on its own. Monday proved it. The jokes got cleaner, quicker, more practiced. People didn't push, they performed. A boy did a mock crawl under a table as she passed the cafeteria line and his friend narrated like a nature show. Another kid clicked his pen like a Geiger counter when she sat down, as if truth could set off a meter. Taylor tried to distract her with talk about a math quiz and a new coffee place near the stadium, but even Taylor kept glancing at the door, listening for the next stray comment to land. By third period, Hailey learned a new part of the building, how sound carries from one end of a hall to the other when someone wants it to. Classified, echoing off lockers. Special ops, with a cough laugh tucked behind it. She kept her pace, kept her eyes on room numbers, copied homework assignments with handwriting that didn't shake. The trick, she'd learned in other towns, wasn't pretending it didn't hurt. The trick was refusing to bleed in public. Mr. Peterson's room turned into a stage more than a class. He didn't tell the jokes, he set the lighting. A unit on elite training became a slideshow of men in sand and surf and a monologue about standards. He highlighted a statistic about attrition and let the silence linger like a verdict. "Any questions?" he asked, face bright, eyes scanning. A boy in the back raised a hand and didn't wait to be called. "Could a woman make it?" Peterson's smile tightened 1 millimeter. "Standards are standards," he said again, a line he clearly liked. "Exceptions are rare." He didn't look at Hailey, and somehow that made it worse. The notes started showing up in more places. Someone slid a folded one into her locker vents so it fell when she opened the door. Another was taped to her desk in biology, "Ask Mom to teach PE." She pulled it off, folded it twice, and tucked it under the plastic cover of her binder alongside the others. The stack was getting thick. She wasn't saving evidence. She was controlling clutter. On Wednesday, the guidance office called her down again. Hayes switched tactics from soft concern to firm boundaries. "There are posts now," he said, fingertips pressed together. "They're not helpful." He didn't show the screen. He didn't have to. "You should avoid fueling it." Hailey watched a second hand crawl around a brass clock and said, "Yes, sir." The meeting ended the way all school meetings end, polite, closed, heavier than it should have been. Outside, the weather turned damp and warm, a Charleston kind of humidity that made the halls feel crowded even when they weren't. Taylor found her at the water fountain. "They're bored," Taylor said, trying to make it sound small. "They'll move on." Hailey nodded because Taylor needed that answer. But she'd been to enough schools to know boredom could stretch for weeks if you fed it just the right rumor. The assembly came on Friday. History department presence, the email said, like a show. The auditorium filled in waves. Hailey picked a seat near the back, aisle side, the way she always did in big rooms. The stage lights washed the color off Peterson's face as he warmed up the crowd with stories about service, tradition, the idea of sacrifice big enough to fill a banner. He clicked through photos, boats over heads, logs, cold water. He knew his audience. He hit some of the toughest men alive like a drum. The word men landed and stuck. Hailey could have let it pass. She tried. She counted aisle lights. She listened to the air conditioner. She pretended the room was empty. Then a voice from the front row cut through the hum, pitched so the mic might catch it, "Tell that to Monroe." Laughter rolled back like a tide. She felt eyes swing toward her in a slow wave. She kept her gaze on her knees and willed her breathing to stay quiet. The laughter didn't stop. It sharpened, then scattered to whispers shaped like knives. She stood before she knew she was standing. The seat thumped up behind her. A pocket of air around her went still. Her voice surprised her when it came. It wasn't loud, but it carried. "That's not true," she said. The room didn't like being told no. The laugh track kicked back in, louder. She let it run over her, then tried again, steadying each word. "Women can do that work. Some do." It wasn't a speech. It was a correction. It landed like a flare in a dark field. Peterson moved to calm the room with his hands. "Let's stay respectful," he said, smile clipped. "We're speaking in general terms." He shifted into a safer sentence about history and percentages. The message underneath was clear: sit down, let the moment pass. Hailey didn't. She wasn't asking to be believed. She was refusing to be erased. My mom serves, she said, simple as a fact on a census form. A boy hollered, in the movies, and the audience rewarded him. Peterson forced a laugh. He wanted credit for not laughing. Okay, he said, back to the lesson. After, the halls buzzed with a mood that felt like game day. She stood up. She said it again. That's commitment. The word commitment wasn't a compliment. By last bell, a second meme replaced the first, a clip art tried and pasted on a PDA photo, captioned Monroe family crest. She turned her screen off before the preview finished loading. The summons to Hayes came first thing Monday. He didn't do the concerned tone this time. He did policy. Disruption, he said. We can't have public scenes in assemblies. He tapped a thin manila folder that didn't look like it could hold anything heavy and made it heavier by tapping it. I warned you, he added, which wasn't quite true in the way he meant it, but accurate in the way power talks to teenagers. Hailey stared at a spot on the wall where the paint didn't match. I answered a claim, she said. You started a chant, he replied. This isn't debate club. He slid a paper across the desk. Her name in a block font. Words like insubordination and disruption dressed up to sound official. Effective immediately, he said, as if the phrase belonged to him. There was a place for a parent's signature, but not for hers. She walked out carrying a copy that felt heavier than her backpack. The secretary did not meet her eyes. In the hall, she passed a teacher who opened his mouth like he might say something human, then closed it and fixed his tie instead. At her locker, she spun the combination, pulled out 2 books, and closed it without looking inside. The edges of everything were too sharp to look at directly. The bus ride home stretched thin. The marsh beyond the bridge looked tired and flat. She held the paper in her lap and pressed the crease with her thumb until the skin went white. At the house, the porch swing didn't move. Inside, the kitchen smelled like coffee gone cold. Jessica stood at the counter with a stack of mail she hadn't opened. Hailey set the paper down without a word. Jessica read it without sitting. Her jaw flexed once. She flipped the page over, then back, like there might be a different ending on the reverse side. Tell me, she said, voice level. Hailey told her about the assembly. She told her about the laughter and the chant that wasn't quite a chant, about the conversation that wasn't a conversation in Hayes's office. She didn't dramatize. She didn't minimize. Jessica listened with her arms folded, the way she did when information mattered, not feelings. When Hailey finished, Jessica took a breath that went all the way down. You told the truth, she said. Hailey nodded once, and that nod broke whatever was holding her upright. She sank into a chair and pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes until the room went bright and then dark. I shouldn't have said anything, she managed. I should have just kept my head down. Jessica knelt so they were level. You don't owe anyone silence, she said. I do. You don't. They sat like that for a long minute, the paper between them like a third presence. When Jessica stood, her movements were measured, not dramatic. She took the letter, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and placed it on the table like evidence to be logged. Then she went to the bedroom and closed the door. Hailey heard the soft click of the lock, then the sound of the closet opening. Metal brushed metal. A zipper moved. She stared at the doorway, not sure if she wanted it to open again or stay shut. When Jessica came back, her eyes had a different focus, the one Hailey had seen only a few times, before dawn, before flights, before long stretches of silence. Jessica set her phone on the table, screen down. There's a school board meeting tomorrow, she said. Calm. Final. We're going. Hailey felt something shift in her chest, not hope yet, but the shape of it. They won't listen, she said. Jessica's mouth moved in what might, in another house, be called a smile. They'll listen, she said. Maybe not to words. She reached for a pad of paper and wrote a time, an address, 2 names. Then she underlined one of them, Mason. Hailey didn't ask who. She didn't need to. The uniform bag in the bedroom didn't move, but it might as well have. By morning the house felt different, like every quiet thing inside it had shifted a few inches without making a sound. Jessica was up before dawn, not noisy, just exact. Coffee, a short call from the back porch, a second call she didn't take on speaker. When Hailey came into the kitchen, Jessica had a small list folded by the mug and the garment bag propped against the chair. No speeches. We leave at 3, she said. Wear something plain. Hailey nodded. Plain she could do. School that day moved like a hallway you'd already memorized. People stared and then pretended they weren't. Taylor caught up between classes and squeezed Hailey's arm. You okay? Hailey said yes and meant, not really, and also doesn't matter. She skipped the cafeteria and ate a granola bar by the back stairs. The sky over Charleston was that bright blue that looks clean in pictures and heavy in person. By last bell she was counting breaths and steps and the seconds until 3. They drove downtown with the radio off. Jessica's hands sat light on the wheel, eyes flicking to mirrors out of habit, not fear. Hailey watched the marshland give way to brick and glass and old facades with new signs. When they pulled into the lot for the district offices, the building looked like every administrative building everywhere, columns, glass doors, a seal that tried too hard. Inside, a receptionist looked up and then up again when she registered Jessica's face. Board meets at 4, the woman said. You can wait in the hall. Jessica thanked her. They took 2 seats on a bench that faced a framed mission statement about students and integrity. At 4 sharp, the boardroom doors opened. Hayes was already in there, tie straight, jaw locked. Mr. Peterson sat a few chairs down with a stack of papers he never looked at. The board chair, a woman with rimless glasses and a careful voice, asked them to sit. We understand there's a dispute, she said, like a weather report. Jessica nodded once. There's a harm, she answered. We're here to correct it. It started polite and brittle. Hayes called the assembly unfortunate. He said the school cannot function under disruption. He used phrases that sound firm until you look at them. Jessica let him run. Then she spoke. My daughter told the truth, she said. You punished her for it. The board chair leaned forward. Mrs. Monroe, with respect, the claim she made, she didn't finish. Jessica didn't interrupt. She simply reached for the garment bag at her feet and unzipped it halfway, enough for the blue to show, enough for the gold to catch fluorescent light. The room stilled. No one breathed loud enough to hear. A knock sounded at the door. It wasn't dramatic. It was crisp, decision made, now entering. The chair looked annoyed. We're in session. Jessica didn't turn. They're with me, she said. The door opened anyway, and the air changed. Not because of noise. Because of posture. 3 operators stepped in first, uniformed, quiet, eyes taking the room as if it were a checklist. Behind them came 2 more. Last was a man with a face like a straight line, Mason. He didn't do introductions. He gave Jessica a nod that said everything. The board froze the way people freeze when the temperature drops without warning. Hayes went pale. Peterson's pen clicked twice in a hand he couldn't keep still. Mason stopped behind Jessica's chair. The others formed a straight, simple line along the wall. No salutes. No theatrics. Only presence. Jessica stood. She didn't put on the uniform. She didn't need to. She lifted the trident from the inner pocket and set it on the table, not like a trophy, like a statement of fact. You questioned whether someone like me exists, she said, voice level. You laughed at my daughter for knowing it. We don't seek attention. We avoid it. Today, we're making an exception. No one moved. The trident caught the light again, the way metal does when it's clean and earned. The board chair cleared her throat and tried a rule. We can't allow non-partis in a closed personnel meeting. Mason answered without raising his voice. We're not parties, he said. We're witnesses. The word sat heavy. Jessica gestured to the paper Hayes had signed. You wrote dishonesty, she said. You wrote disruption. Here is your correction. She didn't offer ID, or mission details, or anything that didn't belong on that table. She offered presence and a pin and the discipline in her posture. Hayes found his voice first and aimed for authority but landed on small. Commander, he stopped, realizing what the word admitted. Mrs. Monroe, he corrected, thin. You must understand how implausible. Mason stepped 1 inch forward. Implausible is not impossible, he said. And your job is not to define the limits of other people's service. Your job is to educate their children without humiliating them. Silence did the rest. The board chair took off her glasses and set them down like they were heavier than they looked. We made an error, she said finally. The expulsion is rescinded. She looked at Hailey, really looked at her for the first time. I'm sorry, she said. No qualifiers. The word almost didn't fit in the room. It still landed clean. Peterson tried to tuck himself behind a procedural comment and failed. Jessica didn't look at him when she spoke. You enjoy your subject, she said. Teach it without turning students into props. He nodded like a man who had just realized a stage isn't a shield. Hayes reached for a form and for something like dignity. We'll clear her record immediately, he said. We'll ensure there's no retaliation. It was the first line he'd spoken that sounded like a promise and not a threat. Jessica lifted the trident, slid it back into the inner pocket, and zipped the garment bag. The operators didn't move until she did. When she pushed in her chair, they stepped back, not out, a unit even in a hallway meant for whispers and excuses. They left the room as quietly as they'd entered. The corridor outside had gathered people the way corridors do when news leaks faster than doors can close. Teachers. A custodian. A secretary holding an armful of files she'd forgotten she was carrying. Heads turned and then ducked. No cameras. Just faces trying to make sense of the gap between what they thought they knew and what had just walked past them. Out in the late afternoon light, the heat wrapped around them again. The operators paused by the steps. Mason shook Jessica's hand, then looked at Hailey like an uncle who had never said the word but felt it anyway. You did fine, he said to her. Stood when it counted. Hailey didn't trust her voice. She nodded, the same small nod her mother used in doorways before flights. They watched the unit go, no formation now, just efficient movement toward unmarked cars that belonged to the same world as the Trident and also to none at all. When the last door shut, the lot sounded like any lot, tires, a gull somewhere, the hum of HVAC. Jessica exhaled. Not relief. Reset. In the SUV, they didn't speak at first. The city slid by in pieces, brick, water, the shadow of a bridge. Hailey stared at the garment bag and felt the shape of something she couldn't name settle in her chest. Pride, maybe. Anger too, but it wasn't running the show anymore. They believed you, she said finally. Jessica kept her eyes on the road. They didn't have to, she said. They had to stop pretending they couldn't. The difference mattered. Back home, the porch swing creaked once and then stilled. The house smelled like lemon cleaner again, the safe, ordinary kind of smell. Jessica hung the garment bag back on the closet hook and stood there for a long beat, hand on the wood, not touching the fabric, touching the decision. Hailey watched from the doorway. Was it wrong? She asked. Breaking the rule. Jessica turned. There are rules to keep people safe, she said. And there are rules that get used to hurt people. I don't break the first kind. She let that sit, then added, I don't let the second kind stand. They ate late. The TV stayed off. The phone buzzed twice, numbers Jessica didn't answer. When Hailey finally went to bed, the house felt like a place again, not a staging area. She lay on her side and replayed the knock on the boardroom door, the line of uniforms along the wall, the way a single pin on a table could shift a whole room. She didn't know what Monday would look like. She knew one thing, she wouldn't be walking into those halls alone, even if she walked in by herself. Monday proved it the minute Hailey stepped through the main doors. The noise level dipped half a notch, not silence, just a different kind of attention. People looked without the smirks. A few tried on neutral like it was a new jacket. The secretary at the front desk gave a small nod she hadn't given before. It wasn't friendship. It was awareness. First period moved like it always did, bell, roll call, notes, but even the teacher's tone had an extra ounce of care. When Hailey raised her hand to answer a question, nobody coughed the word, classified. The desk behind her didn't thump out a drum roll. She didn't mistake it for respect. It was what happens when a story catches up with people's mouths. Taylor slid into step with her between classes like nothing strange had ever happened. You good? She asked. Hailey gave the honest version this time. Better. Taylor blew out a breath. You missed a show. Word as the board meeting was, intense. Hailey shrugged. It was a meeting. Taylor laughed once. Right. They didn't fill the hallway with details. They didn't need to. History was the test. Peterson stood at the front with his slideshow ready, the same beach photos, the same bullet points. He didn't glance at Hailey right away. He started class with a new sentence, we're going to talk about service without turning it into spectacle. Then he actually did. He set standards beside context. He said, operators, without adding men. The room didn't clap. It listened. When he passed back papers, he paused at Hailey's desk just long enough to say, you made your point. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. He went on with the lesson. By lunch, the jokes had lost traction. A couple of kids still tried, quiet comments near the milk cooler, but their friends didn't feed it. At the table by the windows, Taylor picked at fries and said, if anyone gives you trouble, say the word. Hailey smirked. You gonna lecture them to death? Taylor grinned. Debate team starts tryouts next week, actually. You should come. Hailey shook her head out of habit, then paused. She thought about standing in that auditorium and finding her voice even when it cost her. Maybe, she said. The word felt new and possible. The official cleanup came that afternoon. Hayes called her to the office, not with the intercom, but through a student aide. He stood when she entered, which he hadn't done before. Your record is clear, he said, sliding a single-page memo across the desk. The expulsion is voided, and the cause code has been removed. He didn't say apology. He did say, we'll address harassment explicitly with staff and students. It sounded like a policy line, but it was pointed in the right direction. Anything else? Hailey asked, steady. He hesitated. You can tell your mother we appreciate her, clarification. She didn't smile. I'll let her know. At home, Jessica listened to the report and nodded once. No victory dance. Just confirmation. She had already gotten 2 calls that morning from old colleagues. The first was all caution, Carter, you broke pattern. Don't make it a habit. The second was quieter and meant more, you did what you had to. Watch your back for a few weeks. She'd heard both kinds before. She filed them where they belonged and kept moving. The week unfolded like a reset. The sticky notes disappeared. The meme accounts got bored and switched targets. Hailey stopped eating on the back stairs. She sat by the windows again. A boy who had been loudest in the cafeteria mumbled, "My bad," in passing. She didn't make it easy for him. For which part? She asked. He swallowed. All of it. She nodded. Thanks. That was all. On Wednesday, Hailey wandered into debate tryouts mostly to get Taylor off her back. The room smelled like dry erase markers and coffee. The coach ran a simple drill, 1-minute arguments on random topics. When it was Hailey's turn, she stood, set her feet, and argued for keeping phones out of classrooms. No theatrics, just clean points and clear sentences. When the minute ended, the coach looked up from the stopwatch. "You've done this?" he asked. "No," she said. "You should," he replied. Taylor shot her a look that said "told you so" without words. By Friday, the school circulated a bland statement about miscommunication and community values. It didn't name names. It didn't need to. The temperature had shifted. Teachers who had stayed neutral started intervening when laughter edged into cruelty. Peterson shut down a sideways comment with a firm, "That's not what we're doing here," and kept teaching. The hall monitor actually monitored. None of it erased the weeks before. Hailey still caught herself bracing at locker doors and scanning the cafeteria for angles. But the bracing loosened each day. She was choosing where to look now, not being forced to stare at a single version of herself. Saturday morning, Jessica made pancakes like she did when she needed to put the house back into normal. They ate on the porch with the swing creaking steady. "How's your coach?" Jessica asked. "Direct," Hailey said. "You'd like him." They sat in companionable silence, the kind that had come back to them after a long detour. Jessica sipped coffee and finally said, "You know most of what I do stays quiet." Hailey nodded. "I know." Jessica looked at her over the rim of the mug. "Quiet doesn't mean you have to be." It wasn't permission, exactly. It was recognition. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived from the board. Printed apology, signatures at the bottom. Jessica read it once and slid it across the table. Hailey scanned it. The words were stiff but clear: error in judgment, immediate reinstatement, commitment to student dignity. She folded it and tucked it into a folder with her class schedule and debate flyer. Not a trophy. A record. The next week brought small tests. A whisper at a locker that died when she turned. A teacher in math who made a real point of hearing every student. A new kid asking Hailey where the gym was and not recognizing her from anything except the map in her hand. That last one felt like oxygen. Debate practice became a rhythm. Hailey built cases and learned to take questions without flinching. She discovered the part of her voice that had stood up in the auditorium could also stand up for other things without turning every room into a fight. Taylor joked that she was a quiet hammer. The nickname stuck for exactly one practice and then faded, the way good jokes should when they've done their job. One evening, Hailey found Jessica on the back steps watching the sun slide behind the trees. "Do you regret it?" Hailey asked. "The boardroom." Jessica thought for a long beat. "I don't regret protecting you," she said. "I regret that it was required." She nudged Hailey's shoulder with her own. "Next time, we try to solve the small things before they turn into big rooms." Hailey smiled. "Deal." At school, the last fragments of the old story kept trying to attach themselves to her. Not because people were cruel, but because habits take time to die. Hailey decided she didn't have to fix everyone's timeline. She could fix her own. She joined a study group for history and showed up ready. She chose a seat in English that wasn't a corner. She said, "Hi," first twice a day, just to see what happened. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes a real conversation. When Peterson assigned a reflection on service, students groaned. Hailey wrote about ordinary discipline, getting up, showing up, doing the work when nobody claps. She didn't mention Jessica. She didn't need to. The paper came back with a check mark and a short note, clear. Strong. That was enough. The final piece of cleanup arrived in an email to parents, a new harassment procedure, training dates for staff, a line about ensuring our classrooms are safe places for all students. Jessica read it on her phone, stared at the screen a second longer than usual, and put the phone face down. "We'll see if they mean it," she said. Hailey nodded. "I'll know if they don't." By the end of the month, the story everyone thought they knew had lost its script. Hailey was no longer the rumor with a schedule. She was the kid who argued well in debate, who sat by the windows at lunch, who answered questions in history without glancing at the clock. People adjusted. She didn't ask them to like her. She asked them to deal with her as a person, and most days that was exactly what happened. On a quiet Thursday night, Hailey stood in front of her mirror and took stock. Same jacket on the chair. Same stack of paperbacks on the shelf. Different face, not because it had changed, but because she was finally the one deciding how to carry it. She switched off the light and left the door cracked the way she liked. Down the hall, Jessica's door was open, the garment bag behind it still and silent, exactly where it belonged, ready, but not ruling the house. The next morning, Hailey grabbed her backpack and headed out. The porch swing creaked once in the early air. She took the steps 2 at a time. The bus came on time. She climbed aboard and found a seat by the window. As the neighborhoods rolled past, she thought about how quiet can be earned, not just hoped for. She wasn't waiting for it anymore. She was making it, one class, one answer, one small decision at a time. Weeks turned into a clean line on the calendar, the kind you get when nothing explodes and everything still matters. Hailey stopped counting the days since the board meeting and started counting debate rounds, quizzes, and mornings she didn't brace before opening her locker. Quiet wasn't an accident anymore. It was maintenance. Show up, do the work, let the noise die from lack of attention. Fall slid toward winter the way Charleston does it, not with snow, but with earlier sunsets and a bite in the breeze by the marsh. On a Tuesday, debate posted the roster. Hailey's name sat in the middle of the list, not at the top, not at the bottom. Taylor circled hers and held the paper up like a trophy. "You're in," she said. Hailey shrugged to keep the moment small and failed. "I'm in." Practice stretched into a rhythm of note cards and cross-X questions. Hailey learned to take a hit, answer what mattered, ignore what didn't. It felt familiar in a way she didn't say out loud. At school, people adjusted because that's what people do when a story stops feeding them. A freshman asked her where the gym was and called her "ma'am" by accident. She laughed and pointed him down the hall. In history, Peterson kept his promise without making a production of it. He corrected a student cleanly when the kid tried to drag the topic back into spectacle. "This is a class, not a circus," he said. He moved on. Hailey wrote the date at the top of her notes and didn't feel watched. There were still small tests. A whisper by the vending machine that wondered if any of it was true. A smirk in the parking lot from a senior who didn't like losing his favorite joke. Hailey met those moments with the same rule: pick your fights. Most didn't deserve one. When a comment crossed the line in biology, she looked at the teacher and said, "Can we do the lab?" The teacher said, yes, like she meant it, and directed the room back to the beakers. The comment died where it stood. At home, the house settled into ordinary. Jessica ran early, boots tapping the sidewalk before dawn. She cooked on Saturdays, pancakes one week, omelets the next. She answered some calls, ignored others, and didn't narrate either choice. The garment bag stayed where it belonged, hung, closed, silent. Sometimes, after dinner, she told Hailey pieces of the past that weren't in any book. Not missions. Not classified. The human parts. Being cold for days and learning to think anyway. Failing a drill and getting back in the water. Trusting the person next to you not because of what they said, but because of what they did. Hailey listened and filed those ideas next to debate notes and homework. They fit. A month after everything, an email arrived from the district. The board invited families to a small, listening session about campus culture. The message was bland, careful, and probably written by a lawyer. Jessica read it, then looked at Hailey. "We don't owe them attendance," she said. Hailey thought for a beat. "Let's go," she said, "but we don't give them a speech." Jessica nodded. "We don't perform." The room was the same, just without the heat. Parents sat in chairs arranged too close. Administrators practiced their attentive faces. The board chair opened with phrases like "moving forward" and "shared commitment." People spoke, some angry, some tired, some grateful that the school had finally posted a phone number where complaints got answered. Jessica didn't stand. When it ended, the chair approached them quietly. "Thank you for coming," she said. She added, softer, "We're trying to be better before it's a headline." Jessica answered in the same tone. "Be better when no one is watching." It wasn't a threat. It was a standard. On the way out, they passed Hayes by the door. He straightened like his tie was too tight again. "Ms. Monroe," he said to Hailey, then corrected himself, "Hailey." He sounded like a person this time. "If you ever feel like something's off, tell someone." She met his eyes. "I will." He stepped aside. Simple, clean, done. Back at school, debate hosted its first scrimmage. Hailey stood behind the lectern and timed herself with a cheap digital watch. Her case was lean. Her voice didn't climb or drop for effect. She landed points and moved on. When cross-X came, her opponent tried the "sound confident, win by volume" approach. Hailey let the first interruption slide, then set a boundary in a single sentence. "I'll answer if you let me finish." He nodded because the judge was nodding with her. She won the round. Taylor high-fived her in the hallway and yelled, "Quiet Hammer." The nickname stuck for the afternoon and then, like all things at Lincoln Ridge, drifted into the larger noise of other lives. In English, a new unit turned to persuasive writing. The prompt was open: write about something that taught you how to stand up or shut up. Hailey stared at the cursor and didn't mention the board, the trident, or the unit in the hall. She wrote about porch swings that creak when the wind is right, about showing up on time in places that don't know your name, about the difference between secrets and privacy. She ended with a line she knew was plain on purpose: "You don't have to say everything to prove you aren't lying." The paper came back with a check and a single word: true. That was enough. Small kindnesses started showing up in the places where small cuts used to be. A kid held the door without looking for credit. A teacher paused the lesson and asked if everyone had what they needed, then waited long enough for the quiet kids to answer. Taylor invited Hailey to a movie and didn't pick something about soldiers. They got bad popcorn, sat too close to the screen, and argued over the ending on the way home. It was normal in the way people forget to appreciate while they have it. One night, Hailey found Jessica on the back steps, jacket zipped, eyes on the tree line as the sky went pink and then dark. "Do you ever miss telling the whole story?" Hailey asked. Jessica thought about it. "Sometimes," she said. "Then I remember the point of the story isn't me. It's what it protects." She bumped her shoulder into Hailey's. "You don't have to carry my quiet. You get to choose your own." Hailey nodded. "I'm choosing." She didn't list the choices. She didn't need to. Winter break approached. Teachers rushed to finish units. Students counted down. Hailey walked the halls she knew now, how the floor dips near the science wing, where the sunlight hits the stairs at 10 a.m., which water fountain doesn't taste like metal. She didn't feel like a visitor anymore. She felt like someone who would be remembered for something other than a rumor. The last week of the term, Peterson assigned a short talk on any topic tied to service. Groans went up like a reflex. Hailey picked discipline as ordinary. When it was her turn, she stood and told the class that most service looks like boredom done well. Early alarms. Clean gear. Lists. Not quitting in the middle. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't reach for big words. When she finished, nobody clapped. Peterson just said, "Thank you," and moved to the next student. That was the right response. On the final afternoon before break, the building emptied in noisy waves. Hailey stopped by her locker one more time, swapped out books for a small stack to take home, and shut the door with a clean click. Taylor appeared with a candy cane and a grin. "Don't disappear," she said. "Scrimmage in January." Hailey tucked the candy cane into her backpack. "I'll be there." The bus ride back to Mount Pleasant felt like a deep breath. Houses blurred into a steady line. The porch swing creaked once as she climbed the steps. Inside, the tree in the corner was quiet and a little lopsided. Jessica had tried, Hailey would fix it later. Dinner was simple. Conversation was simpler. After dishes, they sat on the back steps with mugs that steamed in the cool air. "Want to hear something funny?" Jessica asked. "I got an email from someone high up who wrote, 'Next time, loop us in before you knock on a door like that.'" Hailey laughed. "Are you going to?" Jessica smirked. "Next time, I plan to have no door to knock on." They let the silence settle. A dog barked 2 houses over. A car door shut and then a second one. Life did what it does. Hailey thought about the year that had almost gone sideways and then didn't. She thought about the first day, the locker, the cafeteria windows, the cold room with the slideshow, the back row of the auditorium, the boardroom that went quiet when presence did what words couldn't. She didn't replay it for pain or pride. She filed it under things that happened and things she learned from. If someone asked her later what the lesson was, she knew she wouldn't give them a speech. She'd keep it simple. Tell the truth you can tell. Protect the truth you can't. Don't let other people turn your life into their stage. Choose when to stand and when to save your breath. And when the room is wrong, don't go alone if you don't have to. The wind picked up and set the swing moving in a slow arc. Jessica stood and tapped the mug against Hailey's. "To next time being smaller," she said. Hailey tapped back. "To next time being easier to ignore." They went inside. The house held steady around them, books on shelves, jackets on hooks, a closed garment bag behind a door that didn't need to open to prove anything. Morning would come with its usual list: practice, homework, calls, a grocery run, maybe a movie. School would come back after the break with the same floors and new posters. People would make new mistakes and fix some of the old ones. Hailey would take her seat by the windows and raise her hand when she had something to say. And when she didn't, she wouldn't. Either way, she'd be fine. She set her alarm, cracked her bedroom window to let in a stripe of cold air, and lay down. Outside, Charleston did its nighttime sounds: far-off traffic, a train horn, a boat on the river if you know what to listen for. Inside, the house was quiet in a good way. Hailey closed her eyes with the steady feeling that she had earned. She didn't need the silence to be perfect. She just needed it to be hers.